Hello, I'm Steve Hoggins, a member of the African American Recovery and Counseling Association and Executive Director of Addiction Treatment Services. I want to share 5 major points summarizing important data about the state of Black addiction treatment in Oregon. I have written numerous papers and newspaper articles regarding culturally specific treatment, challenges facing the African American community, and the effects of gentrification in dividing traditionally consolidated communities of color. I'm going to present some statistical data regarding increasing disparities in Oregon's addiction treatment systems. I thought this video would be more interesting than some report simply filled with a bunch of numbers. Point 1. African Americans as an overall percentage of addiction treatment admissions has been declining over the past 20 years.
In 1994, 5.7% of all treatment admissions were Black. In 2011, that declined to 4.1%. In fact, treatment admissions for all minorities have been slowing over the past 20 years, and really aren't keeping pace with the growth of minorities in the general population. Fairly soon, if the current trend continues, the percentage of minorities in the general population will overtake the percentage of minorities in addiction treatment, and minorities will be mathematically underserved in Oregon's addiction treatment system.
But we still have time to stop the dangerous trend and turn things around. Point number 2. African Americans are not overrepresented in Oregon treatment system.
If you were paying attention to the first graph we showed you, explaining that Blacks are declining as a percentage of Oregon's treatment admissions, you may have noticed that about 4% of the treatment population is Black, while only 2% of the general population is Black. You may be thinking to yourself, Steve, that seems like African Americans are overrepresented, not underrepresented. So why is Steve Hoggins saying there's a problem? Well, here's why. First, Oregon's addiction treatment system serves a disproportionate volume of low-income clients. Since there is a greater number of low-income Blacks, they actually make up a larger percentage of the potential addiction treatment admission pool. In Oregon, about 43% of African Americans live in poverty, compared to 15% of whites.
About 4% of treatment admissions are Black, and about 4% of Oregon Health Plan recipients are African Americans. Additionally, Blacks may simply have a greater need for treatment than other ethnic groups due to the higher rate of substance abuse.
The 2010 National Survey on Drug Use and Health, an annual survey of 72,000 Americans 12 and older, reported that nearly 11% of Blacks reported past month illicit drug abuse, compared to about a little over 9% of Caucasians. In fact, African American past month illicit drug abuse has been higher than other ethnic groups for nearly a decade. When you consider these two important pieces of data, we can clearly see that Blacks are not overrepresented in Oregon's treatment system.
You may be wondering, why do Blacks have a higher rate of substance abuse compared to other ethnic groups?
The most likely answer is due to the fact that Blacks are more concentrated in urban centers, and urban cities have higher rates of substance abuse compared to suburban and rural areas. Examining this graph from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health reveals that metropolitan counties, both large and small, have higher rates of recent illicit drug abuse compared to non-metro counties. In general, big cities have more minorities and more drug abuse. Currently, Portland is nearly 28% minority and 72% non-Hispanic white. Most U.S. metropolitan cities have become increasingly diverse, and whites are now actually the minority in cities like Los Angeles. Los Angeles is about 71% ethnic minority and 29% non-Hispanic white. This trend is expected to continue in years to come.
Experts estimate that whites will become the minority in the U.S. no later than 2050. Point number 3. African Americans have the poorest treatment outcomes of all ethnic minority groups.
In 2010, 36.3% of blacks completed treatment compared to 48% of whites. Nationwide, TEDS reports that about 42% of blacks completed treatment in 2007. It appears that Oregon's treatment completion rate for blacks is lower than the national average and is considerably lower than the completion rate for whites.
Curiously, Multnomah County has the poorest treatment outcomes for blacks, with only 32.5% completing treatment, a whopping 10% lower than the national average for blacks and a stunning 15% lower than the statewide average completion rate. This leads us into point number 4. African Americans have the absolute poorest completion rates in Oregon drug court and are underrepresented in Oregon drug court.
Reporting completion rates in drug court takes a long time due to the length of time that people participate. In 2009, 70 blacks were admitted to Oregon drug courts. Of those 70, 17 completed and 6 are still active. If all of the 6 remaining clients complete, which is unlikely that all 6 of them would, then the maximum possible completion rate for all of the 2009 black clients will be about 32%, compared to the 51% completion rate for whites. Additionally, African American admissions as a percentage of admissions to drug court are on the decline. In Multnomah County, African American admissions as a percentage of admissions to Multnomah County Drug Court are on the decline as well. In 2009, 17.3% of Multnomah County Drug Court clients were black. That dropped to 12.6% in 2010 and down to 11% in 2011. In Oregon, African Americans make up about 10% of the entire criminal justice population, but make up only 6.1% of the drug court population. In Multnomah County, blacks make up about 23% of the entire community corrections population, but make up only 11% of the drug court population.
Wrapping things up is point number 5. African Americans are dwindling in Oregon addiction treatment systems.
In 2002, 3.1% of Oregon CADCs were black. Today, less than 1% of new CADC applicants are black.
African American addiction counselors are becoming increasingly disenfranchised from the addiction treatment field.
There are 2 primary reasons for this. 1, indefensible academic requirements for urban addiction counseling jobs. These are eliminating a lot of African American applicants. Remember, urban areas have the highest concentration of minorities. Simultaneously, they have the highest occupational academic standards. A survey of the ACBO Jobs Posting Board revealed that 65% of addiction counselor job openings requested a preference for a graduate degree, and 26% requested a bachelor's degree. There isn't one single shred of scientific evidence to suggest that a degreed substance abuse counselor is more effective than a non-degreed counselor. In fact, there is scientific evidence suggesting that non-degreed counselors are equally effective. Indefensible academic requirements are gradually eliminating the volume of recovering people and minorities from the addiction treatment field. and sadly it appears that outcomes are declining for African Americans. Our addiction treatment system has changed radically over the past decade. America now has the most advanced addiction treatment system in the world, the most research-based practices, the most medication, and the highest academic requirements. And despite all of that, treatment completion rates haven't really improved, and treatment dropout rates have actually increased over the past decade. Academic opportunity has significantly increased for blacks and other minorities over the past 25 years. However, this is not the case at the graduate level. Among U.S. citizens, about 85% of all graduate degrees have been conferred to Caucasians. Lastly, as most of you are well aware, criminal history prohibitions have been a major stumbling block for African Americans seeking employment in addictions treatment, where programs are co-licensed for mental health.
Sadly, since most programs are now co-licensed for mental health, there are more exclusionary criteria applied to addiction counseling staff. As most of you know, and it's no secret, there has been significant disparity in arrests, prosecutions, and sentencing between blacks and Caucasians committing the same identical crimes.
African Americans have a greater probability of having a criminal history and are more likely to be excluded from the addictions treatment field.
Today, the mentor program here at the Miracles Club is bolstering an 80% engagement, retention, and mentor completion, compared to 36% engagement, retention, and completion rate in standard addiction treatment. When African American clients work with other blacks who have been where they have been, the power is unparalleled. There is hope. Thank you for listening.